Welcome to this evening's service. We'll begin with our prayer for peace. Divine Creator, we ask that the light of highest awareness fill the minds and hearts of those who are open to your light. We ask that they be assisted and strengthened in their resolve to achieve peace using peaceful means. May their minds, their hearts, and their actions reflect the divine will to good for all. Comfort, strengthen, and support those who are in a difficult situation in their mind, body, or spirit. Bring confidence to them that your divine hand is at work in their life. Amen. Good evening. This is the Community Chapel for Holistic Healing. I'm Reverend Mary Huber, pastor, and we have a wonderful program for you this evening. We were started in 1977 by Reverend Michelle Luson, a mystic and channel for the multidimensional consciousness, which we have carried here in this organization ever since. We are here and dedicated to the enlightenment and the unfoldment of spirituality within every individual and therefore in the world at large as a result of the individual changes. We have ongoing chapel services twice a month. We have weekly programs it's on our website, which is ccwh.com, and I invite you to go there and look at some of the events that we have and past services as well. We will always begin every service with prayer given to us through Michelle's channel by Spirit, the three affirmations of faith, hope, and charity, which we call the three healers, because they affect every system in the human body to realign it. We begin with the faith affirmation. I believe in the spiritual existence of myself as a perfect image of the divine creator. And in this reflection that is my physical embodiment, I have faith in the supreme guidance of my soul for my balance, my needs, and my opportunities. Outside of myself are also perfect images, and nothing can delude my thinking otherwise. The hope affirmation. Acknowledging my faith in the omnipresence of my divinity. I hope for realization, awareness, and acknowledgement of the existence of the great I am within myself. The charity affirmation. In understanding faith, in knowing hope, I pledge my actions, my desires, and my thoughts to the performances of myself on the physical planes of the earth, to honor, to love, and to enlighten all that is a reflection of the divine outside myself, so that my perfection is imaged back to my Creator. So help me God. And so be it. This evening's wonderful topic on the most important spiritual tool that we have is prayer. And I have with us Reverend Kelly Will, who will give her understanding of it and following that with a meditation. Reverend Kelly Wilk has been a minister since 2009, so that makes it almost 17 years now. It'll be, I guess, in May, it'll be 17 years since she's been ordained by Reverend Michelle Luson. And Kelly, by the way, does conduct the weekly Tuesday evenings healing sessions, and you are invited to participate if you can in that. I'm going to turn this over to Reverend Kelly Welk. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you so much for inviting me tonight. I'm glad to be here. And yes, certainly We have our healers meeting on Tuesday evenings at 7:30 on Zoom, and we would love to have you join us to send some healing to those in need. And tonight, as Mary mentioned, I'm going to be talking about prayer. So, maybe you all have heard prayer described as talking to God, right? And how wonderful that we can communicate with the divine at any time, anywhere. God is a part of all of us, and God always wants to communicate with us. And if you just sit with that a minute, that's a very profound truth, and it is a truth. So when we think of prayer, a lot of us might be thinking of some specific words grouped together that we learned maybe at church, maybe at home as children, and we repeated. And certainly this is prayer, but there is so much more than that, too. So, prayer, in my mind, a big part of prayer is connection with the divine, right? There is a divine spark in so much around us, in people, in animals, in plants, even in things that we think of as non living, the earth itself. When we are meant to connect with our deepest selves, to connect with each other, to connect with all life, and to connect to God. Now, this oneness with life, this oneness with all things living, non living, is very deeply understood by many ancient peoples, including the ancient Celts. And we have the priestly class in the ancient Celtic world was the Druids. And they have they had a lot of practices then. We have some surviving oral traditions where you see them really putting themselves in the place of various living creatures. They're trying to really envision themselves as a hawk, for example, or as a salmon in the river. They really understood this oneness with all life. And we see these examples of it. And we can do that too, right? If we're out in nature, we're trying to connect with living things. That connection in and of itself is a type of prayer. Why am I saying that? You might be thinking. I think it still counts as a prayer because if you have this oneness, this connection, then your sense of compassion, of empathy, grows exponentially. And what is more spiritual than that, than growing our compassion, our empathy? That's so important. And that's something that can really be achieved through this honoring of living organisms and through this connection. We also see more of this oneness in many shamanic practices, right? The medicine wheel using the 4 elements, for example. It really grounds us here in our physical reality. And there's certainly a way that even being present in the physical, being grounded in that way, can become a type of living prayer, you might say. So I'll just run through an example of this. A lot of times I like to connect with the four elements. I like to connect with them as they are on the earth and also as they are within our own bodies. So, as an example, you can start by thinking about the earth, right? The earth itself, you can think of it in terms of the ground under our feet, um, rocks, layers of soil, um, just the earth itself in general, that great entity, that great sustaining force, our home. So we can think of the earth in that way and we can connect it to our own physical selves, right? Our bodies are of the earth, our bones, our skin, every part of our bodies. The next element we can think about is air. You know, you can picture that as the wind blowing, as clouds moving, that beautiful shifting element. And within our own bodies, we have that in our breath, as we're always breathing in and out and having that oxygen moving, that element of air within us. We can think of the element of fire. And we can picture this maybe as a great bonfire, you know, maybe as lightning in the sky. We can see fire as it appears on earth and in our own bodies. We can see our nervous systems, all those neurons firing, our own body electric. And then we have the element of water that we can connect with. We're so lucky to have so much natural water around us. You might connect with a stream or see a lake. Maybe you're thinking of the ocean. We have that beautiful element. And then within us, we have so much water. Our bloodstream moving. And if we meditate and think and connect with all these things, we can see that the physical is really a type of living prayer. So if we're thinking about all these things, we're thinking about even being alive in the physical and connected with parts of life as being a type of prayer, then I think it makes it seem a little less daunting when we read in Paul's first letter to the Thessalonians to pray without ceasing, right? I think we can gain more of an understanding of what Paul means there, even though I also think it's worthwhile to pray often. Certainly, if you're praying frequently, you're generating more energy, more of this prayer energy, this positive momentum. And that's a very powerful and useful thing when we're praying, for certain. Um, and I also think the idea of praying without ceasing has to do with our mindset, sort of our attitude of gratitude, as it were. Because if we're seeing everything as coming from God, if we're seeing an inability to be separated from God, you know, God is always with us, God is always there, then we are, in essence, praying without ceasing. Another sort of alternative prayer that is still very powerful um, brings to mind some words attributed at least to St. Francis of Assisi. He's believed to have said, preach the word of God at all times, and when necessary, use words. And very frequently, that has been interpreted as meaning good works can equal, this connection can equal a living prayer, right? So, one of our fellow ministers here was talking about his prison ministry. You know, that's certainly prayer in action. Of course, they actually pray there, but that's certainly helping others. We have Reverend McGrath, who does so much work with the homeless. That's a way of praying, of living a prayer. And I know you all do so many things that are helpful. These can be very small scale things, a kind word, listening to someone who's in need. And they can be larger scale things. But it is nice to keep in mind that these good works are helpful too, right? They're consolidating that connection. They're becoming a living prayer. Now, sometimes if I talk to people about prayer, they might say something a little bit like, I try to pray, but then I feel like I'm not doing anything, right? So sometimes if you think of living prayers more like as connecting or good works, that might help you get past that sort of block. Even though I do want to reassure you that praying is doing something. It's generating and moving tremendous energy. If you are praying, first you're establishing an alignment, a connection with the divine. And then, especially if you have consistent prayer, you've got a lot of momentum, a lot of energy going. Um, but if you have prayer plus that alignment, then we can essentially be getting out of our own way and letting spirit do the work, right? Of course, there's still things we have to do on earth, but that's something that prayer helps with tremendously, a sort of opening up to spirit, letting them lead you and guide you. So, one thing that can really make prayer powerful is consistency. And certainly, if there are prayers you know by heart, you can say them over and over again. That helps to build that momentum, that energy to be brought into the physical. Um, there are many cultures that use mantras, for example, kind of like chanted words or prayers that are repeated over and over and over. And these can be powerful. Sometimes they can even put you in sort of a trance like state. And this trance like state can really help calm you physically, mentally, emotionally. It can make it easier for you to have that alignment with the divine. And then that, in turn, leads to greater ease of manifestation. So I'm sure we all know many prayers, many words, collections of words that we can pray. And I'd also like to reassure you that God's happy to talk like a friend, right? It's beautiful to recite prayers. I love using prayers that are old, that have been around for hundreds or even thousands of years. But sometimes you just need to talk to God as a friend. And that's okay too. That's very accessible. I've said it before and I'll say it again, God is always with us. And that's a very, very beautiful thing. So I wanted to talk about um, bearing witness, or the role of witness, which we see show up in Christianity, for example. So, kind of in our modern vernacular, a witness is usually seen as, in sort of a legal sense, as someone who's seen a crime being committed. Um, right? A witness has seen our everyday sort of life without the divine. And interestingly, in Christianity, a witness is defined more as someone who shares personal experience of God's love through transformed lives. So, in that sense, in that Christian sense, if you're a witness, far from seeing crime, far from seeing our everyday world being guided by humans, instead, you're seeing an experience, a personal experience of God's love. And part of how you're showing that to others is by living a transformed life. And I do believe very sincerely that prayer, especially when done regularly and with sincerity, leads to transformed lives. So I came across that information about how Christianity views the witness, and I just found that fascinating. Another bit of information I came across some years ago now was about medieval church practice, and I don't know if you all have heard of it, but it has to do with someone serving as an anchoress, occasionally as an anchor, but more frequently, the person who was assigned this role in medieval Christianity was a woman. So they were referred to as an anchoress. One very famous anchoress that you all might have heard of is St. Julian of Norwich, who was also a very prolific writer. And we use briefly one of her prayers in our healing group, as a matter of fact. But in medieval Christianity, there was this role of an anchoress like St. Julian of Norwich. And this was someone who would withdraw from society and take a vow of, it was called a vow of stability. So they would actually live in a small room attached to a church. And this area was called an anchor hold. And this person would engage in very intense prayer, in contemplation, in seclusion for the most part. but they would also serve as spiritual advisors to others in the community, both in the church and in the greater community. And they were considered, quote, dead to the world, but alive to God. And by taking this role, they could really bring in profound knowledge, profound insight from Spirit, from God to others. You may be thinking, well, that's interesting. What does that have to do with us today? Right? There's not many people I know of who are going to, sit in their room and not move and become an anchor or anchoress. And yet, in so many ways, all of us gathered here, all of us who were gathered together in prayer, who are drawn to spirituality, who are drawn to helping others, we are serving as anchors of light right now. And I would bet many of us are engaging in intense prayer and in contemplation and are spiritual advisors. I would bet in many ways, many of us here tonight are, quote, dead to the world, but alive to God. And I do think that's a powerful role for us to play, even if at sometimes it seems difficult. I do think it's a very important one, and it's one that Spirit sees and honors and respects, this anchoring of the light on earth. It is needed so much now because so many people are bringing in energies that are not of the light. It is essential that as many people as possible remain grounded and anchored in the light, hold that position, and just keep bringing in more and more light and really letting it show. I think that role cannot be overstated. Absolutely not. So frequently when we think of prayer, we think of the spoken word. We have discussed, or I've talked about a few other ways of prayer that do not involve the spoken word, like anchoring light, like doing good works, like connecting to nature and all life. And another one of these less commonly acknowledged forms of prayer that I think is nonetheless very important is one of silence, right? Certainly, prayer is communication with God. Prayer is so often us speaking to God. And then silence or meditation, in some cases, is frequently defined as listening to God. And I think that is another aspect, right? The communication goes both ways. Not only do we ask for things from God, but we really do receive answers. Of course, we probably all heard that phrase, the still small voice, right? our own God within is not a loud shouting type, but is rather still and small. And sometimes, especially in today's world that can seem so loud and distracting, it can be very hard to hear that still small voice. But meditation, some level of silence, is a very great, profound, and meaningful way to do just that. There are so many ways to meditate out there, really. I mean, sitting in silence is certainly one. Even if you're sitting in a quiet place, monitoring your breath, for example, or gazing at something like a candle flame, all these are accessible, readily available ways that we can successfully meditate. Now, excuse me, sometimes I get asked, can we really pray for others? And I would say, absolutely. I think that's a great reason to pray. I'm a mom myself, and I'm certainly frequently moved to pray for my kids and my family. And I'm sure you all are too. In fact, I would say praying, or in some cases, blessing another person, or even perhaps a beloved pet or an object like your car or your home, blessing those things, extending a prayer over them can be very empowering and very helpful to us. And it doesn't have to be a big, complicated thing, right? If you just say, I bless my vehicle, may it carry me safely on this trip. I bless my dog today, may they be healthy and happy. I bless my children or my loved ones as they go about their daily business. You're empowering yourself as well as extending some divine protection over others when you do that. And I feel like there's sometimes a lack of confidence with people. They're like, well, I don't know. Can I really bless somebody else? But what you are, in essence, doing is praying for them. You're praying for their protection. You're praying for their healing. You're praying a blessing over them. If the prayer itself, saying those words doesn't seem like quite enough to you, um, you might find it helpful to visualize a symbol that represents the divine to you, and very strongly visualize that symbol being on the person or pet or object that you're blessing. That can really add some deep meaning and some deep power. Symbols have very deep connections to us and can certainly be used successfully in this way. Another thing that I sometimes do, and you might want to try too, is to visualize a shield of light or like a bubble of light around one of your loved ones. Or really, I use this every day with my car. Um, and that's something that you can certainly do and you're bringing in divine protection, right? You're not really using your own personal power here. You can do that, but then you'll be quickly depleted and it won't work as well as if you're using a universal energy, right? So if you can connect to a higher energy, the highest possible, like creator energy, and then set the blessing or the shield of light, then you will have sort of an unlimited power source. And that is what you want to do to set up a shield of light. So, those are all some accessible, easy to do practices that can bring you into alignment with the divine, that can help you help others. Speaking of helping others, we've talked about how you can pray blessings over others, certainly. One little caveat I would add about praying for others is that's not our responsibility, thankfully, to work out every little detail of how another's problem should be solved, right? And so when we're praying for someone, we should be holding, the end result sort of in mind and keeping that in alignment with the highest and greatest good for all. But we don't need to ourselves work out every minute detail. In fact, it's better if we sort of let go and let God, right? If we open it up to a higher power, which we can do with prayer, with our aligning ourselves with the divine. So that is one thing I would say when you're praying for others. If you're saying, oh, I really hope, so and so gets a job. And you might be thinking of a very specific job, that's in mind. And that's fine. That's fine and well. But it might do you good to just say, I hope they get this job, this, or something better, this, or something else in their highest and greatest good, right? You don't need to hammer out all the details yourself. We can let spirit do that because after all, whatever knowledge we have of the issue at hand, it's limited compared to what the angelic realm knows or what God knows. It's very limited compared to that. So I would say just please consider that and be sure that you're open to many options when you're praying. Whenever people ask me, does prayer really work? I say absolutely. And I would strongly encourage you to try it yourself and get back to me. Because certainly in my experience, prayer is so, so powerful, so beneficial to us. Brenda, would you mind putting up the next slide when you get the chance? Thank you. So, why is prayer powerful? Primarily because it's connecting us with the divine. It is helpful if we have consistency in prayer. This doesn't mean mindless repetition, but the more prayer, the better. We don't want to be like in that country song, we only talk to God when we need a favor. Another nice, vital, really um, need in prayer is to have joy. If you're coming from a place of joy, that can manifest very successfully. Even though I do want to be clear that any prayer is better than no prayer, even if it's short, even if you're not in a good place when you're praying, please start with prayer because it is helpful. Certainly, it's important to bring yourself into alignment with the divine first. You can do this in a very straightforward way by calling out to the Creator internally or using external words. You might have some quick meditation you do that connects you with the divine, or a picture you look at, something like that. And it's also beneficial if you can really put yourself into a prayer, really visualize the prayer as strongly and completely as you can. Right? The same as we hear with manifestation principles, it applies to prayer too. If you can visualize the outcome, including your own feelings during the outcome, that will aid in the manifestation. Details aren't required, but it's nice to visualize that positive end result. Okay, and our next slide, if you don't mind, Brenda. So just to sum up, I would like to say prayer is an important force. And we can pray for virtually any reason or help with so many things. I list some here: healing relationships, work, home life, any of those things, anything at all. And does it work? Please try it. I really, 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 truly believe more prayer benefit us and everyone on earth tremendously. So I thank you for listening to this talk on prayer. And now we're going to do a brief meditation to bring us some nice calm and perhaps some messages from the divine for us. So we're going to take some deep breaths, get into a comfortable position, and just keep taking a few more of these deep breaths in and out. Bringing ourselves to a place of peace and calm. We feel our energies stretching downwards out of our bodies, perhaps through the soles of our feet, like the roots of a great tree, anchoring us firmly to earth and earth light. From here, we feel a profound sense of groundedness and support, a massive foundational strength. We take a moment to absorb that feeling now. We scan our bodies, physical and energetic, combing out any energies that are tangled or unnecessary, and releasing them down our grounding cords where they can be safely transmuted by the earth. And then we stretch our energies upwards through the centers of our bodies, out the tops of our heads, like the branches of a great tree.
Dinner's here.
We reach upwards towards the light, the highest light we can access, creator light, source light, the light of the all that is. And we let that light shine down on us. We feel the light coming inside of us, around us, filling in any gaps, any empty spaces, any wounded areas. The light comes in to heal and to soothe. Now we know we are grounded and cleared, connected and protected. From this place of spiritual strength, we are calm and open. We open ourselves to the divine, being open to whatever guidance or healing or light might be coming into us from the divine now. And we just spend a few moments breathing steadily, being in a peace-filled place, and being open and receptive to the divine. Now, We've been listening for a short time here to the messages from the divine. If we have any prayers we would like to communicate to the divine, we can send them up, raise them up now. And now we have received some guidance. We have sent some prayers up to the divine. We give thanks for our time here together. We begin taking some deep breaths and coming back to our more everyday realities. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly, for that beautiful message and the lovely meditation. At this point, I'd like you to consider going to our website, ccwh.com, and look for the PayPal button. And if you can, we would so appreciate some of a donation of any amount to our organization to keep us solvent and to keep this ability to be online and to bring messages to the public. We thank you for that. And in regard to that, I would like to offer a prayer of thanksgiving in anticipation of your donation. Father, Mother, God, you are the giver of every good and perfect gift. Give us grateful hearts that we may share freely with others all you have given us. Amen. And now, if you will, in your mind, we will stand in a circle, joining our hands and singing our particular words to the song, Let There Be Peace on Earth.